So we're going to start with these questions that were submitted to us on Facebook, in our Facebook group. If you're not a part of our Facebook group, please message us and we'll let you be part of that. Of course, you can like our Facebook page. But the question that was presented by, was it Ty?
It was Ty, yes.
Okay. Are dinosaurs mentioned anywhere in the Bible? And I found that this question was related, so we'll answer. I think Lisa asked this question. If Adam and Eve were the only two people to begin with, does that mean that their kids had to marry each other? And I put it that way, just in case we had some kids behind. You get the drift, right? Like the point. If Adam and Eve were the only two people to start with, does that mean that their kids had to marry each other? So that's a very tough question to deal with if you take a strict literal view of the book of Genesis. So that's what we're going to look at. Is these two questions raise a larger question, and that is, how are we supposed to interpret the book of Genesis? In particular, the creation narrative and the presentation in the book of Genesis of the early history of humanity. So we're talking about the creation, Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, and the flood. How literally are we supposed to take those stories? Are we supposed to take them strictly literally, or is there maybe a different way to understand them? So I'm just going to share with you, not necessarily give you my opinion, but at least tell you what the options are. And so there are those who take the Genesis account of creation and the presentation of the early history of humanity literally, and they would fall under the young earth creationist view, the category of young earth creationists. And they would hold that based upon the ages of the people listed in the Bible, starting with Adam, if you take all the ages of the genealogy of Adam and you add them up, there's no way that the earth or the universe could be more than 10,000 years old. So they say that the universe and everything created in it was created over 6 literal 24-hour days, as the book of Genesis says at the beginning, but it was all less than 10,000 years ago. So that's the young earth creationist view. But then there are those who hold to the old earth creationist view, and that means that they don't take the book of Genesis, this early part of Genesis, they don't take it so literally. They don't completely spiritualize it, or whatever you want to put it, but they don't take it as literally as the young earth creationists. And why is that? Because the scientific consensus today is that how old is the universe? Anyone know how old the universe is supposed to be? Over 13 billion years old. And so they don't want to deny what scientists agree on, but they also don't want to deny the book, the Bible, the truth of the Bible. So they hold on to the basic spiritual truths that the early part of Genesis teaches us, but they don't interpret it so literally that they can't also understand the universe to be billions of years old. So I'll show you how there's at least three different ways that you can be an old earth creationist. There is, firstly, the day-age creationism view, and that is that the 6 days referred to in the Genesis account of creation are not ordinary 24-hour days, but rather much longer periods of time. So each day could represent maybe millions or billions of years. And so if you take it that way, then you can still take what Genesis is telling us, that God created everything, but you just recognize that it was taken over a long period of time. The word day in Hebrew has the same, how do you want to put it? The word day in English could be used both for a literal 24-hour day, right? But it can also mean the day of whatever. It might refer to an era. So the word for day in Hebrew, yom, also has that stretchability, if you want to put it that way. It can mean a 24-hour day, but it can also mean a period of time. So that's how they take the 6 days of creation to be long periods of time. Then you may have heard of the gap theory. I actually think this is a pretty good possibility. That the 6-day creation, as described in the book of Genesis, did involve literal 24-hour days, but there was a gap of time between two distinct creations in the first and second verses of Genesis. So what's the first verse in Genesis? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then the second verse is, and the earth was formless and void. So what they're saying is in between these two verses could be an unspecified amount of time which could account for the billions of years that scientists are now finding is the age of the earth. And so that way you can keep what the book of Genesis says. God is the creator, and God did recreate the world in 6 days, as it says, but then there's a whole chunk of time in between where there could have been something else, right? I don't think you can say with certainty about any of these views, right? But some might make sense to you. Then there's the framework interpretation. This says that there is a pattern or a framework present in the Genesis account, and because of that, the account may not have been intended as a strict chronological record of creation. What that's saying is the 6-day creation story is telling us something very important about about God creating the universe and how He wants us to relate to Him, but it's not to be taken as strictly something that is telling us about a timeline. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go too deeply into that. But I wanted to share with you, these are at least the approaches you can take if you're an old earth creationist. But regardless of these approaches, whichever old approach you take, if you're an old earth creationist, the point is that you're not taking everything strictly literally. And that means you are not bound to deny what scientists are saying today. And that means you are able to retain whatever spiritual truths the book of Genesis is teaching us. But because you're not taking it so literally, you can also accept what scientists are saying. So there's a lot of genuine Bible-believing Christians who are old earth creationists. But there's also the people who are young earth creationists, and they would say that the universe is less than 10,000 years old, so they would be bound to deny what modern scientists are saying, and therefore they would have to answer this way when it comes to the question, are dinosaurs in the Bible? From an old earth creationist view, dinosaurs lived in that unspecified period of time, right? Dinosaurs lived millions of years ago. However, and therefore they were not mentioned in the Bible because human beings came later, and the Bible starts with human beings, right? But a young earth creationist would say that dinosaurs were created at the same time as all the rest of the animals, and pretty much on the same day as human beings. Therefore, dinosaurs did live with human beings, and are probably mentioned in the Bible. So I'll show you a few examples. Sometimes in the Bible you're going to encounter, and it's all the same Hebrew word, but sometimes it's translated differently. Sometimes it's translated as, how does it say here? Sea monster, a serpent, or even sometimes it's translated as dragon, especially in the King James Version. Or sometimes, like in the book of Job, you find a creature called the behemoth, and the creature called Leviathan. And they're not just roller coasters at Canada's Wonderland. They're from the Bible. They're creatures mentioned in the Bible. And so a lot of young earth creationists would say, those are dinosaurs. The word dinosaur didn't come into existence until a couple hundred years ago. Therefore, ancient man just called them by different names. And this is the way the Jewish people would have called them. That's possible. Now, an old earth creationist would say that the creatures described in the Bible as sea monsters or serpents or dragons or behemoth or leviathan, they are either purely mythological creatures, or they simply describe very big animals that we encounter, like an elephant, a hippopotamus, or a bull. So, as you can see, I'm not giving you my opinion, I'm just telling you what the different options are out there. So to answer the question, are dinosaurs mentioned in the Bible? Depends on how you interpret the Bible. So you have to do more studying, and then you can come to your own conclusions. We know they existed. Everybody agrees that they existed. The question is, when did they exist, right? So the second question that's related to that is, are we all descendants of Adam and Eve? Meaning, did their kids have to marry each other? And from a young earth creationist view, who takes Genesis strictly literally, then yes, Adam and Eve's children had to marry each other. There were no other human beings for them to mate with, right? So they had to marry each other, otherwise the human race could not continue. However, if you hold to the old earth creationist view, then, like I mentioned earlier, you can keep whatever spiritual truths Genesis is teaching us, but you're not taking everything strictly literally, so perhaps Adam and Eve weren't the only ones there at the time, or however you want to understand that, right? So the point being is that all of these questions have to do with your approach to the Bible. And you can see that Bible study is a complicated thing. It's not just read it and just you're going to understand it. You have to really study it and know the different interpretations. So, I at least want you to think about which interpretation you want to take. Do you want to take Genesis strictly literally, or do you want to take it not so literally, but still keep all the amazing truths that it teaches, spiritual truths that it teaches? That's for you to decide.